Good evening and Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you once again for joining us for our second episode on active learning in our sixth series webinar space for hybrid learning would be next. And previously we had the digital ecosystem. If you're joining us live, it would be great, just like last time, if you drop us a little line to let us know who you are and where you're from, maybe a little job title, what do you do, where you're from, and we'll maybe get a chance to say hello to you. So today we've got a absolute loaded panel of experts, and I'll go through them one by one, introducing them. And first off, I'd love to introduce you to John from Teach Active. Good evening, John, and welcome to the show.
Good evening. Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Wolfgang, and good evening to you all. Nice to be working with you all today. Very much looking forward to the webinar.
Fabulous. And next we have our very own Annika from i3 Technologies, one of our educational consultants. Welcome, Annika.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here as well.
Excellent. And next we have, as is probably most important, possibly, a teacher from Omnimundo, Olivier. Hello, Ollie.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Belgium calling. Happy to be here again.
Fabulous. And last but not least, a person that you've met before and probably know from other forums, our very own ICT evangelist, Mark. Hello, Mark, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Wolfgang, and welcome, everybody. Looking forward to learning and sharing over the course of the next hour. Thanks for having me on again.
Fabulous. So without further ado, as you can see, we've got a loaded panel, but really to kick things off, I think the main point of today is really for our audience to leave with a good feeling of what active learning looks like, a bit of inspiration and maybe some help and assistance. And so to start off with, John, what exactly is active learning and why should schools consider it part of their approach to teaching and learning?
Okay, so for us, it's an interesting one in terms of what is active learning. So some people know it as active learning. PAL is a phrase that a lot of people will know in terms of physically active learning. And the new one seems to be movement integration as well, which is one that we're a fan of because basically in terms of this approach, all we're talking about is non-sedentary behavior, is getting the children up and about and moving. And sometimes that can just be bums off seats and moving around the classroom because that's the only perhaps space that we've got. And of course, it can be increasing. So it could be going down to your hall or your sports hall and perhaps getting that heart rate up a little bit more, or even taking learning outside as well. But predominantly, people think, oh, it's maybe all about running around and like headless chickens. And it's not that. It's just certainly bringing a little bit of physical activity and a little bit of movement into learning.
And John, I think something that's quite important also for who you represent, I think there's also something that the audience might be quite keen to know about what's happening today in terms of, could there be a little something to entice people to stay till the end?
Yeah, so of course, at Teach Active, we do two things. So very much we work with a lot of teachers and training them on the benefits of physical activity, hence why we're here today. But also we do have a resource that supports schools. And as part of this webinar today, we're giving away a free license. And so we will be picking out one lucky winner and announcing that at the end of the session.
Brilliant, fantastic. And Annika, I mean, you've got the real pleasure for us from a company's perspective, but you get this really great part of your job where you're allowed and opened into schools and classroom environments. I think you probably have a really good insight into this as well.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, active learning is not only the movement we bring into classrooms, but of course also the students that will be involved in the lessons. So that's an active way of learning as well. So, but of course, our movement kind of learning we do have with IMO is really a perfect way of bringing movement into the classroom. And we can do this with an analog way and a digital way. And this is really a very, very nice way. It's not only bringing exercises in the classroom, but also, of course, just bring kids in an active way into your lesson. And that's always nice to see when you see the smile on their faces.
It is, absolutely. And I can attest to that. I mean, recently I watched you lead a workshop at the Future Classroom Lab in Brussels, and it was with adults, not children, but they all turned into children once they got onto the IMOs, and they had to move them about and not fall off. And but I also think you mentioned the IMO, Annika. I think else that we're also giving away, right?
Yes, of course. We will give a starters package as a prize, and that means that you can receive 4 IMOs. And for now, maybe you don't know what it is, but it's like the 4 cubes, IMO Learn cubes, with the digital mode inside, so you can connect as well with your computer or your touchscreen to create little games, and so you can engage your students into the classroom. But in some next stages, Olivier will tell you much more about this, because he is really like the magician with IMO in his classroom.
And actually, that's a perfect segue, Annika. You're absolutely right. And so, Olivier, you know, as I said, I think the real importance is the teaching and learning, and being in front of the students. And as a teacher, luckily, you know, John, Mark, Annika, myself, we all come from the education and teaching sector. So can you share some actual examples of where active learning has really worked well for you in a school, and the kind of impact that it has led to?
Of course, I would be more than happy to share those experiences with all of you guys. As you all know, good education starts with students that are really engaged, and engaged students, they learn better when they have an active role in the whole learning process, and when they take the ownership of the learning with themselves, then the results are enormous. About active learning in a physical way, but when you talk about active learning, I also think about collaboration and communication. And when you combine all those things in your beautiful playground that is called your classroom, then magic happens. And the first thing I want to say is, as a teacher, don't be afraid to jump. You will get in this adventure, and you will experience lots of beautiful things with your students and have powerful moments. Like, for instance, last week we have to learn French in P5 because I'm teaching P5, and vocabulary is really a burden for our kids because I have a lot of non-native language speakers here, and French as a new language is difficult. So what did we do? We first did our lesson, and then we were starting to play with the IMO cubes to learn about the vocabulary. We have a small film about it where the students are practicing their French, and by moving around the IMO cubes, they practice the vocabulary in French. So that gamification makes sure that they will be active, and that they will recall the subject that we learned a lot better than only by learning or reading it in a textbook. Another thing that is really powerful, we think, is that communication side and that collaboration side. When students are talking to each other, they inspire each other, they ignite the flame within them and within the others. And when you can surpass the walls of your classroom and connect with others around the world, like we do in the virtual classroom in i3 LearnUp, then we can make friends from all around the world, and then we can talk about different climate zones or different time zones or different cultures with people that are living on the other side of the world. And those powerful moments ignite the fire in those students, and then they get engaged. And I think that's also really a huge part in active learning in the class.
And Olivier, I think, I've seen some cool videos of yours in the classroom. I think it'd be really great for our audience to maybe get a little glimpse of that. So if we could maybe have the video, one of the videos that actually show you in action and the students in action, that would be fantastic. Brilliant. So maybe just a quick word on what was going on there.
So they were exercising the vocabulary In this time it was in Dutch. But they also practice social skills. We always say in our school we are using hardware to practice soft skills and social skills. So you saw collaboration, you saw communication, and because they have a certain goal, the communication is also completely related to that goal. So they act as one group. Everybody finds their position. So there are lots of social skills involved. Everybody also says when you put a child in front of a screen, that they will be quiet, but that's not the case. When you use the screen in the proper way, they will communicate in a proper way.
Excellent. So John, I mean, you've got an extensive experience as well on how active learning looks like, and I think it's a perfect time to sort of talk a little bit from your perspective and experience, just backing up on or going on the back of what Olivier just showed us and talked about.
Okay, yeah, great. I think that we've got some slides as well, just talking about the benefits of active learning. In terms of this, it's great to hear Olivier there talking about teaching French and Dutch, and I suppose the main work that I do here in the UK is schools teaching maths and English, but through this approach. And actually, rather than thinking that we have to be sat down to teach English and maths, exactly, if you've just seen, we can be perhaps up and out of chairs. And why we should do this, and why I think schools should consider it, and why the whole journey started for me is, first of all, we know that it gets children active. It's a real big push. Of course, we know that children are inactive enough, too inactive rather, and very sedentary, especially because of the past 18 months. So we know that we can make the school day more active by this approach. But it's also exactly attitudes. Again, as Olivier said, it's about engaged children. It's about them loving maths and English and other subjects, smile on the face, twinkle in their eye, and this approach will certainly help to do that. But I think it's really important also to point out that it's not just airy-fairy and all good fun and children enjoy it, which is really important, but it does actually improve attainment as well. And there is so much research now. We work in partnership with Loughborough University here in the UK, and so much research that shows that link between physical activity and cognition, and how it actually supports memory, concentration, and actually retaining information as well. And then the fourth one is about whole child development. And again, I think, Caitlin, if we've got another slide on that of the child of the whole development. And it's really interesting when I ask children why physical activity is important, they say to me it's about staying slim, fit and healthy. And I say, well, that's true, but do you also know that it's going to help your memory, your concentration? It's going to help you with social skills, teamwork, resilience, determination, self-esteem, confidence, and all of these wider benefits that. So when I'm talking to schools, actually, in terms of those four benefits, you're going to have active children. They're going to love their learning. They're going to attain better. But actually, we're going to develop the whole child, and that's why we all came into teaching. I suppose that the reason would be, why wouldn't you do active learning rather than necessarily why would you?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic, and I think Annika, you're a person to go perfectly next for this, as sort of in terms of the active learning, your experience, and viewing some of these great examples. Anything to add on top of what Olivier and John have just talked about?
Yeah, it is. You see, that's what I told in the beginning. Active learning is not only the movement you give to your students, but it is actually to promote higher in thinking. So you can do the movement by learning something else, of course. And that's why when bringing all these things together, you have like such a nice environment in your classroom and a nice way to teach children, and actually to bring them into the real life, because that's how they learn the best way, like doing things. And I think that's the active way of learning, and that's the most important thing.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I'd like to go back, because Olivier, we've got another video of your classroom with the language learning, specifically French, and I think it was quite a good example of just another application and movement and activity within your classroom. So that it would be quite good, I think, for our viewers to have a look at that video.
Mettez-vous sur l'aimant. Mettez-vous sous l'aimant. Mettez-vous devant de l'aimant. Devant de l'aimant, Otis. Voilà. Mettez-vous derrière de l'aimant. Mettez-vous sur l'aimant. Mettez-vous sous l'aimant.
And look, I mean, I'll let you talk about that in a second, but that last little clip of one of them giggling, I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's so wonderful to do an activity like that, and you saw on the screen also. Our classes are not that big, so that's another positive point about those IMOs. You get a very multifunctional classroom. You have some tables, you have those IMOs as clever seating devices, and it's such a big plus that you also can use them to teach other stuff, and they are moving and they're having fun. They get inspired and they are learning, and that's the thing I want to see in my class. That little sparkle in their eyes, even behind the mouth.
Yeah, and something that I also noticed very much on that is that even though we're all representing edtech companies, the technology was secondary there. It was all about the physical activity in this case. I loved also the fact that no single student was actually pressured, because you can just watch a little bit and go, oh, okay, no, I need to be behind, and this is underneath, and so there was a real it was a good combination of how that class works. And I've been in it. It's your class is multilingual and multicultural, so it's fantastic. Great. So John, I think back over to you. I think it would be a good point also to talk a little bit about Teach Active as a tool and what it is that you guys actually do.
Yeah, of course. So Teach Active is it's an online resource that provides schools with and teachers with lesson plans and resources on how to deliver the English and the maths curriculum, but through physical activity, exactly as we just suggested. So there's 3,500 lesson plans. All the resources are there for them. Of course, people on this webinar, it's about active learning, and hopefully we've got many teachers out there who can come up with their own ideas and have a go. You can get 50 free ones from the website. Have a go, see if it's something that your children enjoy, and then either integrate that yourself, or of course you can feel free to have a looking at the website as a whole as well. But I think that we've got a little video which demonstrates the benefits.
Teach Active are passionate about active learning, incorporating physical activity into the English and maths curriculum, and using this approach to really drive up attitudes and attainment within these key subjects.
Children benefit from Teach Active because the minute we mention we're going to do one of the activities, straight away they're keen to get involved, smiles on the faces, and really want to join in, which is just so pleasing as a teacher.
It gets the children engaged, it gets them active, gets them moving and thinking. Once you've tried it a couple of times, it's a go-to for all lessons because it is so easy.
They can choose their objectives, go to a drop-down menu, and the resources and lesson plans are there for you. That helps save teachers hours of planning time.
The biggest thing is pupils really want to join in and take part with all the different activities that we've given them, so I would definitely recommend it to other schools.
We've got children now that love maths and really enjoy and are engaged in it, and that's really shown in the results. They want to learn then. They don't realise they're learning actually.
Not only will it impact on your data, your standards, your outcomes, but you'll see a renewed vigour and enthusiasm and enjoyment across both pupils and staff.
Containing over 3,000 plans mapped to the primary curriculum and covering every objective from foundation stage to year 6. Teach Active will save your teachers hours of planning time and complement any scheme of work, and it will really allow active learning to become embedded within your school.
Brilliant. I think that really very nicely sums it up. And again, I just love seeing the videos. And Scott Weiss from America, from the USA, actually commented on the same thing. He says, great videos. And that's what it's all about, seeing this in action, seeing students involved. Absolutely spot on there, Scott. So moving on a little bit into the digital domain, and it's the longest I've kept Mark quiet ever, I think. But I'd love to hear from you, Mark. You know, you're obviously somebody who's very engaged and has been for a long time, ever since I've known you, and way before, I'm sure. But in tools and using them and looking at what's useful and value added. So I'd love, and I think our viewers would as well, hear a little bit about the kind of experiences you've had of tools and methods, maybe even, that have really helped and elevated active learning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much, Wolfgang. I mean, it was always something sort of on my radar, and actually being active is something that I've tried to do with my children in the classroom throughout my teaching career. But what was really interesting for me was when I attended the Google Certified Teacher Institute back 2014, so quite some time ago now. And it was the learning and the thinking that, and a reminder that being active whilst you're going through a learning process fires the neurons more. There's more oxygen getting to your brain. You can breathe more easily. You're not sort of sat bent over. So you're in a much more healthy sort of positioning. All these sorts of things. And so, there are some great tools out there to promote these sort of things, such as GoNoodle, a great tool for getting children active between learning sessions, and they've got lots of resources and other things in there. Things around mindfulness and self-awareness and all these things alongside other resources that are there. But what I've tried to sort of share and promote is making sure, and it's different. I'm a secondary teacher by trade, so it's different for me, where I get to see, children on rotation lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson, compared to primary, where you'd see those same children virtually all day. But even so, I'd still try to make sure that my children would have some time when they would actually be out of their chairs and being involved in some thinking, conversations, discussions, think, pair, share, doing it not in a way that was done across the room with children sat in their rows and all these sort of things, or in the computer lab sat around by their machines, but actually getting at their chairs and doing things. And so what I want to sort of share as a means of doing these things really easily, because it's about the thinking and the reason why you choose to do this, as opposed to the tools, really. I think often. So one thing that I sort of share with people is how easily you can sort of set little reminders and timers. You could use your smart device here, for example. Smart devices often ask you every hour to sort of stand up. My watch is always telling me, I need to achieve my stand goal for the day, and all these sorts of things. But we can replicate those sorts of activities ourselves. Just go into Google and type in timer, 20 minutes or 500 seconds or whatever. It will automatically create a timer, so the children would know after a specific amount of time it was time to shift around. We used to do this sort of thing with peer feedback. As an IT teacher, what I'd ask my children to do when we're doing a sort of review and peer assessment thing, it is get up and move around and sort of a bit like speed dating, but going around and giving feedback on everybody's work around the room. So rather than looking at physical resources, using the digital resources and moving from device to device to device. I think the important thing and most thing I would share as being probably the most important is keeping it on your radar. It's very easy to not have this on your radar when you've got so much content to cover across a curriculum, when you've got lots of things to be teaching and sharing and getting through. Keeping it on your radar and building it in as a de facto thing in your thinking about how you behave and act in the classroom, and then coming up with some processes which are consistently applied across all of your classes, means it just becomes part of what you do, the fabric of what you do from one lesson to the next. So that would be my sort of thinking about it. So sure, there are tools out there such as GoNoodle. There's the resources you can use from people like John at Teach Active. You can use the IMO, so forth and so on. But don't forget to use some of the simple tools that are out there that can facilitate the reminder to do these sort of things as and when it's appropriate in your own sort of setting in the classroom, would be my advice.
Yeah, and it reminded me of something that I did. I've done some research into timetabling in the past for a school or with a group of teachers, and one of the papers we found was actually suggesting that timetabling should be done in 8-minute blocks. So you can do 45 minutes, of course, it's dividable by 8. But so as a teacher, as a reminder, it sort of suggested that if you're going to talk to the class, it either has to be for 8 minutes or the next slot would be then 16 minutes. So then you really start thinking about, okay, what's the purpose of talking to a class for 16 minutes? as a monologue, basically? Or should I talk for 8 minutes, get them to do something else for 8 minutes? And it kind of really encourages that thinking of active learning and being involved in the class. Whether, active learning for me certainly doesn't always have to be moving around, jumping and running, but actually, brain activity is part of active learning and just the engagement. Ollie, moving to you on the back of what Mark said. I mean, you're in the classroom and you use a lot of tools. We've seen some. So maybe you can share a little bit more with us about that.
Yeah, of course. We as a team and as a school, we were cherry picking between hardware and software to combine to get a very powerful learning environment. And I think it's really important as a school, when you're going this way, you have to look on the market and see what works and what doesn't work, that suits your needs the best and interests the students the most, because it doesn't make any sense to go in a certain way when you notice that the students are not using the technology or hardware or software that you want to use. And I was earlier talking about the importance of communication and collaboration to come to good education. And that besides those points, we also are looking at the creativity of the students. We think it's really important that all those things get somewhere a combination to engage that powerful learning. That's why, for instance, we are using i3 LearnHub a lot because in i3 LearnHub, that software solution, our students, they can make exercises for others of the class. They can exercise together. They can make presentations. They can collaborate. They can go in a virtual class. All those things are combined in one easy, accessible package that really suits our needs as a school. And then, like I said earlier, magic happens. When you're working with all those materials and all those tools at their best, then the students get ownership of their own learning, and then you get very good results. Like we also tested those results out, and we saw that a lot of our students they admitted that they had a better knowledge of the teaching stuff we are doing in our class. So we as a school are happy with this way of working.
The fuzzy, beautiful part of all of this, we all know that things also go wrong sometimes in the classroom, and there are things to be aware of, and especially when looking at the digital part of teaching again. And so maybe, Mark, coming back to you, you've seen a lot of this as well again. And so I just want to know, what are the pitfalls that maybe schools and teachers should be aware of when looking at planning their lessons and their activities?
Yeah, thank you again, Wolfgang. I think it's important to, if you're going to be, and I think John would sort of back me up on this, if you're thinking about trying to embed children being active within the classroom, it should be done in a way which matches with your kind of vision as a school and in your approaches and what you're trying to achieve as a school, and making it actually part of the curriculum, rather than being something that happens sort of perhaps in isolation, or just it's keep fit week, so let's just do it for 1 week. It should be carefully thought about, planned and mapped, and just part of the fabric of what you do as a school. If it's important to you, then it should be important to you, not just for 1 day of the year or one week of the year. You don't want to pay lip service to these approaches and what have you. So just think carefully about how it works. And again, the success or failure of any initiative in an organisation, be it a school or any other, is when your staff feel empowered and enabled to do these sort of things. So how are you going to train your teachers? How are you going to make it so that they can be creative themselves, to allow their students to be creative? Are there resources that are going to be needed? Is there a training demand? What resources will you need? Do you need to subscribe to Teach Active to support your maths and numeracy in your school? Where else can you go to look for these things? What can you do to develop it within your team? Is it subject specific things? How can you do that? Active learning in science, will look different to active learning in English, for example. So how are you going to make it work in those different areas as well? And so, my advice would be, again, don't just stick it to 1 week or 1 day of the year. Build it in and think carefully. And if you're identifying this as a need and an approach within your school, then do it and do it properly. Don't just sort of use it as a little sticker to tick a box for one thing on a day or a week within the year.
Yeah, and I think coming straight out of the edtech, director and coordinator role that I used to have, so just being a little bit more specific about the educational tools and digital tools, I think oftentimes we get really wowed by something that we're shown on a one-off, but then when transferring that into the classroom, it's got a totally different application and problem aspect to it that we may not have even thought about. It might not integrate with other systems. We might not be able to get out the data that we thought we would. We might not be able to put things in very easily. It might be a totally silo type standalone activity. So for me also, I think something that I've always been very keen on relaying to teachers and administrators is thinking really very carefully about the teaching and learning goals, your outcomes, your objectives, and concentrating on that and letting that be the driver for no matter what, whether it's active learning or other types of learning, really having that as the core driver, because I think then it's really ensuring success in the long run and far less flawed with sort of pitfalls as we're just talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
John,
and I think it gives us, Wolfgang, an opportunity to think about things differently across the board as well. So I'm a strong advocate for helping teachers in the same sort of way that you might help students. So one size fits all, inset day, we wouldn't do that to our students in the classroom. So why would we do that to teachers on an inset day or a CPD day? So, if we're thinking about active learning and how can we apply that to other activities within the school? So something I used to do in my department meetings, for example, was to have them stood up. Yeah, so we were actually active and moving around and doing things. I'd use my classroom area to put different resources in different places to get us moving around and talking about them in that kind of a way to really sort of push home the ideas that we were doing. And what we found was we were more productive by doing our meetings in this kind of a way. And the meetings were actually a lot shorter than they would have been otherwise. Often, department meetings, what they're like, we've all been in them. You sit down, you get your coffee at the end of the day, you're like, and we've got this meeting for 90 minutes. Okay, so let's use the full 90 minutes. Why use the full 90 minutes when 50, 40 could be enough to cover what you need to do, and bring in some activities and being active during that meeting. It gives us, if we're thinking as an organisation about what we can do, I think we should think not just on how we can support the children in the classroom, but how can we support our colleagues to be more active in their activities as well.
Absolutely, 100%.
And that's nice. And that's nice as well with the IMOs, of course. Like we have them in Ollie's classroom, like they have it as their chair actually. So Ollie he can change his classroom from one way to another. He can change his environment, and that's the nice way. So children, they can choose to be active, like in sitting in a dynamic way, and that's always to be active in their minds as well. So that's very nice.
Yeah. And John, I mean, you come out of teaching as well, and with your hat on now, obviously, with Teach Active, you must have seen a bunch of pitfalls and things to be wary of for schools to give them a bit of advice on.
Yeah, I think Mark summed it up really well when he just said about that whole school approach and let's not just do it during, here we have National School Sport Week or Health Week, and that tends to be where we do a lot of it. And actually, what I say to schools is, why not do it every week? And why not start to, when you're planning out your curriculum, think about what opportunities are there for movement. So it's about the whole school approach. I was delivering a conference recently, and I asked how important is children being active, and everyone wrote down lots of all of the ideas and all of the benefits that we've spoke about today. And then I asked them, well, if it's that important, is it part of your school development plan? And of course, a lot of people said no, because our school development plan is improving reading or improving maths and perhaps those core subjects. But perhaps what I was suggesting is, well, physical activity can really benefit all of those. And also, we didn't come into teaching so we can just get children to an academic level and send them on. It's to develop all of those key skills that we spoke about as well. I think other things, in your school, you have like a math subject leader or an English subject leader. I would always say maybe we have an active learning leader as well, someone who wants to fly the flag, someone who wants to really shout about it, wants to make sure it's on the agenda at a staff meeting, wants to put a display around it at the school so it's on everyone's agenda so that the children can see things around it. And I do think it's really important to get, of course, all the staff on board. and staff buy in for different reasons, don't they? So when I tell some staff that children, and 70% of the school day is sedentary, children 5 hours plus in front of a screen, physical activity is the world's 4th biggest killer. Some will go, oh my gosh, we need to get children more active. Some it might be because I say that your children are going to love it. Others it might be because of attainment. So different people, and I just try and get them to buy in for lots of different reasons, so that we can really get everyone on board, because that whole school approach is key. And at Teach Active, any of our schools, we deliver free training to them all, because we know how important that first stage is to really get in, everyone thinking, actually, if this is important, we're all going to commit to doing this every single week.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to also step away. Like Mark said, I come predominantly from the sort of middle and high school teaching environment, and very often you fall foul of creating silos of teachers that don't really share because of time constraints. It's not the natural position, but sort of really tackling things from a school, or at least from a departmental point of view, where you've got colleagues to bounce ideas off, to share frustrations with, to work things through together. And I think all of those aspects from a community perspective, I think were really, really helpful and useful. So yeah, I think one of the questions that I would really like is to ask about is how can active learning be supporting hybrid learning, for example? We've all gone through it at the moment. It's very prevalent still, remote hybrid learning. Mark, maybe you can jump in on that and just give a little bit of an example or advice on that part.
Well, as it goes, I thought, given the panel that we've got here of experts and who work in this way, I know from my own part with my own children during the various lockdowns, sure, we did the Joe Wicks sort of thing and sort of danced around and did a little bit of activity and stuff, but that was pretty much it during their lockdown. So I was wondering, what advice anyone on the call today might have about how we could actually promote children being more active when they have to be at home because there's a lockdown, or the schools have to shut because of the number of COVID cases, or you've got some children in the classroom. It's hybrid. You've got some in the classroom, some down the corridor, some at home. All of these sorts of things. Because I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to look at things slightly differently. It's great to have access to things like IMOs in the classroom and have great resources from organisations like Teach Active. But how can we actually sort of go in on this? John, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's something that we've had to really consider at Teach Active. So one of the things that we did is we've developed a Teach Active homework. So it allows parents to log in at home and say what age their child is, what they need support with. So, for example, it might be telling the time or times tables, and then they will be shown games and activities on how to teach that through physical activity. So rather than telling the time, perhaps the way that we would do it, maybe we're going to go outside and build a clock. Maybe we're going to go and collect things and come in and do a piece of writing about it. Maybe we're going to get a balloon and do times tables by hitting it to one another. Actually, there's a great piece of research with regards to, it's actually SES, special needs children, and learning number bonds and times tables, actually going up the stairs or on a trampoline. And the other thing that we did is we created isolation packs. And this was, for example, that those children who were maybe having to be at home, and then teachers could send them to the parents or load them on the various things that we've used, Google Classroom, Seesaw, whatever things that you've used. And again, it would be maths and English lessons to say, well, actually, here's a lesson, but rather than doing it at the dining room table or at your desk, you're going to be up and about. And I think it's a real eye-opener for parents, because they thought, gosh, as many of us do, we didn't learn like this at school, but actually I've seen my child really engaged and really enjoyed that type of learning as well. So we have reached out to families and taken it home as well. And, it's been very well received, which is a really positive thing.
Yeah, brilliant. And to add to that, David Morgan just made a really good point in the chat saying so many schools have amazing spaces, pods, wide corridors, multifunction rooms, etc., that need to be used more. And so maybe let's schedule more classes in these spaces to give teachers the nudge that they need to think outside of the box. And I remember back in Zurich, we did something like that, where for a large part of the week, we actually pooled students in grades 5, 6, and 7, and then maths and science classes, we only trialed it with those two. The teachers would actually come in and give, for example, lessons to much smaller cohorts, but that they weren't separated by grade. It was separated by who needs help in certain aspects. And all right, we're moving a little bit away from maybe the conventional topic of active learning. But again, I feel there was a lot more activity. There was a lot more creativity and thinking involved, because students, they were collaborating. They would get out of seats in these spaces. One of the biggest spaces schools usually have are libraries or cafeterias, in fact. And so we use both of those for the students to gather in and then break out into different rooms.
Just on that, Wolfgang, one other thing is a lot of schools obviously use active learning as an intervention as well. And for those small groups, so we might have children who are falling behind in whether that's maths, English, science, whatever subject that may be. And sometimes doing more of the same doesn't work, and actually can put children off those types of lessons. So by getting them to do it in a different way and saying, actually, I'm going to play a game with you, not only can it be a different approach that opens it up and actually makes the child realize, I understand it this way. It can be a real great tool to helping them perhaps catch up with their peers if they've got some gaps in learning as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Ollie, I think it would be good for you to talk a little bit about the kind of resources that there are and how you go about making your lessons a little bit more active, and speak to that a little bit for our audience.
Yeah, of course. So, like I said earlier, I'm a teacher in Belgium, and I'm teaching in Antwerp in the primary school Omnimundo. And Omnimundo is a very multicultural school. It has 45 different nationalities. And in my class alone, I've got 22 students from more than 14 different countries at the moment. That new country means new school environment, different culture, different learning paths. Some of my kids have never been to school, so they have to learn from the very start. And like I said earlier, I have a lot of non-native language speakers. And the thing we must always remember as teachers is that the future of our society is in our classes today, and no one must be left behind. And I think that the pandemic, we were referring it, my colleagues are referring it already earlier in this in this show. The pandemic learned us that it's very easy to leave people behind. And I think active learning also means that everybody can participate in learning. And we as a school, we have undertaken a huge exercise to reach out to every one of our students, to show them how ICT or tools are being used to be active also when they are at home, because they have to be in quarantine. So we must, as a school team or as a teacher, you must not be focused only on the safe environment that is in your classroom, or only the device itself, but it's really important that you train your whole team, that you train your students how to use all those tools at their best to do the thing we like to do the most, and that's teaching, and that our students are able to learn even in difficult circumstances. Earlier, I was talking about the soft skills and the social skills. Our school, because we are in a huge peak now in Belgium with the pandemic, we also noticed that the ICT and the learning materials we were implementing in our classes are now the window inside the houses of our students, and the students use those tools as a contact to the teacher, not only for teaching, but also to tell about their feelings, to tell about their way of doing and coping with life at the moment. So I think that's also a little bit active learning, not physically active, but being involved, being engaged.
Yeah, fantastic. I think it is that the engagement part is so important, isn't it? I mean, we've talked about it a couple of times now in terms of who's engaged and what the types of people and the masses that need to be engaged. I think that's a really, really important point. So I think, another thing that we need to think about is from a school leader's perspective. what steps should school leaders take to support the continued professional development, specifically, about active learning? So maybe Annika, you could tell us a little bit about your experience about school leaders and the steps that they could take or should take, maybe.
Yeah, the first thing to start, of course, is if you bring some new tools into a school, it needs to be carried by the whole school, just as Mark mentioned before. And if you come into a school with, like, for example, what I do with IMO-Learn and with i3LearnUp, the active learning environment, then of course you need to take a look at the level of the teachers and what they want to bring in. So that means that you need to bring it in step by step. Like, for example, IMO-Learn, we bring it in like the first time, it's just like they can use it in an analog way, in like just using it as a dice, do some little things, like you can sit on it and the different ways of sitting, and you can bring it in a dynamic way into your classroom to use it just as a chair or things like that. And then step by step you bring in some exercises, like, okay, let's do an exercises, for example, and there is a teacher in Lithuania and she starts every morning just with the thing, everybody puts all their things aside on their desk, and if somebody is ready, just go and sit on your cube or stand on your cube, and then there is a question, like, for example, who had breakfast this morning? We'll put the green color on the top. If you don't have breakfast, just put the red color on top, and then they can do like can sit on it or stand on it, things like that. And so step by step you can go on. And then of course, in maybe one of the final things, they can put the digital tool in it, so they can bring in the MDM in it, and they can start creating exercises and little games in i3LearnUp. And so you can use step by step all those things from the beginning till the end. And I think that's very important to think with the principal, with the teachers, how you can implement and how you can engage your teachers in schools with all these things. And that's a very, very important one, not to bring it all in the beginning, like, okay, this is what it is and you need to do it, but just, step by step. And that's what I've learned in all those times, and that's what I see in Ollie's school as well. In the beginning, we just start with, it's a chair and you can use it like that, and then step by step. And also with the students, from September on, we start with analog exercises. We give them later on, we give them, we register them in i3LearnUp, and they start creating little games all by themselves, then together, then with a real subject and things like that. And that's the nice way. They feel it, and then, then it's okay. If they feel it's okay, then it will be a great tool in your classroom, and that's nice.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a conference I went to many years ago where it was talking about quality teaching, learning, and good learning, and one of the main points that was made is students know what good teaching and learning looks like inherently. They know by default if a teacher is delivering well, if they're learning well, and you sometimes can't explain why, but as you said, that feeling, that it's there by nature. John, you work a lot with admin and school leaders, I'm sure, in your role, and so it would be, what kind of advice and guidance can you give from your experience?
Well, just picking up on some of the things that were said there, actually, is I mean, obviously we spoke about last time about SLT. It needs to come from them, and of course their love of this, and they're wanting to put that throughout the whole school and get all stakeholders involved, school governors and parents and everyone on board with this movement. I was speaking to a teacher last week, and she said the way that she gets her staff really involved is at staff meetings. She plays games with them and she demonstrates and she shows them. I'm going to school next week, and I've planned some games to play with them. So have maths games, run and calculate, where we're running and collecting parts of a number calculation, and then we have to put it all in order. So this is something that, of course, anyone listening could introduce and do with their with their young people and their children tomorrow. You know, we've done orienteering where actually, if I've got 20 problems that I want the children to solve, maybe rather than giving them at a desk, I actually chop them up and go and stick them around the hall or on trees and outside. Simple games like order, where I give the children maybe a fraction or a number, and they've got to get in order, maybe on a bench, to make it a little bit more interesting. When we're telling times, I give some of them digital clocks and some of them analog clocks, and they go and find their partners. Things like, rather than giving the children numbers, actually we make those numbers ourselves by doing some challenges. So how many, I don't know, how many star jumps can you do in 30 seconds? And that will be one bit of a number that we've got. And then we can order everyone in the classroom. So there are so many ways in which we can just think about, when we're trying to teach a certain concept, is there a bit of a different way to do it? And I suppose when I'm talking to head teachers, one of the things that it's really important that I share with them is the impact that it has. So I know that we've got a slide on impact, and we work with over, in the UK is our main market. We work with over 1,000 schools, and we've worked in six different countries as well. And it's the schools, that's what I love. There is lots of research about the benefits of active learning, but what I love is the teachers who are on the shop floor, who are doing this and say, I do this and my children absolutely love it. Their Holy Family, just to talk through a few of these schools, Holy Family is a school in Surrey in the UK. Their maths results went from the national average to the top 2% of maths results nationwide. And the situation that the head teacher had there was disengaged girls who he knew he could get more out of them. And actually he did that through this active learning. So it brought them out of themselves, and confidence grew, and therefore attainment followed. Gladys Street is a school in Liverpool. Obviously, Liverpool is a place many of you will have heard of. Their school went up 21% increase within 12 months. Duckman, these schools are similar. Kensington Primary School won in the UK won Primary School of the Year. And again, they were shown how they took this approach. Again, their aim was with children with English as an additional language, and how this actually broke down barriers and allowed a lot of social skills, number talk, in terms of supporting their learning. And you'll also see next to Kensington that they are the TES Health and Wellbeing School of the Year as well. And I think that is the golden thread throughout their school, in terms of, physical activity is so important. They've rewritten their whole curriculum so that physical activity and health and well-being is at the center of everything that they do. And of course, there's other aspects to that, but active learning is really key and at the heart. And I think when I speak to other senior leaders, it's really important that I get across that this isn't something that, it's just, as I said before, airy, fairy and good fun. It's something that will, if we put it in place, it's sustainable, and it will really make a difference to the children within your school. And of course, that's why I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah. Ollie, I mean, you get to see it a lot, but is there, I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here, but in terms of what John just mentioned there with the well-being aspect and the link, that positive link between the mental health and well-being and active learning, can you talk a little on that, like the changes you see in the children, or maybe even research that you've read? I'm not sure, but that sort of link between the well-being and health of students and active learning.
Mm-hmm. Of course. I want to start with an experience I had as a child by myself. When I was young, we had very, how you say in English, not really attractive lessons that we had to follow. And sometimes we had a teacher training, and that teacher trainee, he had a thing that was called an energizer. We know what an energizer means. And in the beginning of my career as a teacher now 20 years ago, I was also very focused on using energizers between the lessons to release the energy of the students, to get them smiling again. So it is absolutely wonderful that education at this moment in time uses energizers and active learning as the core business of the teaching, because this way the children are able to release their energy and to be active and to be involved, and you see them smiling the whole day. And I think it's really spectacular that we moved from small energized moments until being active as much as possible in the classes during the day.
That's brilliant. Yeah, so a couple of logistical things in a bit, but before we head towards that bit, I really would like to have a look at who's won our prizes and show. I bet you all are really excited about this. Who has won our prizes? We've got them on. There we go. Our active learning starter pack goes to Gesamtschule Frödenberg, to Annegret. And our Teach Active license goes to Richard from Stamford Endowed Schools in the UK. Fantastic. Look at that. Hopefully you're watching. If not, don't worry. You're hopefully going to watch the recording. We'll be in contact from our side. Back to the panel. Do you guys... Yes, that's right, Ollie. A little silent or loud clap. Is there anything that any of you would like to add as we wrap up today? Before we move on, anything that you sort of thought of that we haven't really covered, or anything you'd still like to input?
I'd want to reinforce that link that John was sort of sharing, and Ollie, sorry, Ollie, sort of reinforce that link between activity and well-being and positive mental health. It's huge, and if you look at any of the research about the impact of the pandemic on young people, it's been the impact it's had on their well-being and their mental health. And so, teaching and education is a morally sort of driven sector anyway, so I think that anything we can do to work to improve and further develop and support the well-being and mental health of our young people and our educators as well, I think is something worthy of consideration. So if you're watching today and haven't thought about active learning in your school before, hopefully there's been enough compelling conversation here to get you thinking about it, whether it's in an early years or reception or primary setting, thinking about IMOs, to using resources with Teach Active, to any of the other things that have been discussed. I think we've got a moral imperative to think carefully about how we can support these important aspects, health, well-being, whether it's mental health or physical health. I think these are all important things that we should be promoting as educators, because that's part of what we do as teachers, isn't it? We want the best for our young people, and we want the best for our societies and so forth and so on. So just to reinforce that key point for me, Wolfgang, because I think that's what it's all about. It's about helping make an impact and making that dent, as it were, that positive dent in education.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the beauty of these webinar series and the jobs that we all do in our respective roles, is that we get to actually look at the core of that and how we can really make a difference in education and concentrate on the fundamental goals and objectives rather than just sort of the surface of it. Ollie, you were going to mention something as well still?
Yeah, we hope that with moments like this, we ignite a spark in the minds of other teachers, and that we are getting them engaged. And feel always free to reach out to people who are a little bit experienced in this. We are more than happy to help you, and don't be afraid to take that active jump, because it's worthwhile.
Absolutely, and I think on that point, Ollie, it's really important also to know that we'll be sending out a follow-up email with all the contact details of everyone, so that you guys get to be able to contact the different people. So before we leave you, though, I do want to talk a little bit about what's next. We've got a really exciting third and fourth episode to our series in March, and we're going to be having a hybrid teaching from the tech perspective. So we're going to have an assistant superintendent and a tech director on the show, and an expert from Intel. And then when the hybrid teaching teacher episode, we're going to concentrate far more what that all looked like and does look like from a teaching and learning perspective. So really from the pedagogical foundations. Fantastic, I think. So thank you all very much, Ollie, Annika, Mark, and John. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for spending the last hour with me and the audience, sharing your expertise and passing on your knowledge. And hopefully this is the beginning, not the end, of your involvement with the audience. And there'll be plenty of questions and engagement to come. As Ollie said, it's a spark, not just a hammer on the head, so to speak. So thank you all very much. Have a good evening and see you in March.
Thank you all.